and welcome to the Let's Talk podcast. It's an honor to have you with us today. My name is Chris Root. As we pull up scripture and have an amazing conversation together, I hope that this podcast will encourage and impact you in your life in a mighty way. So what you say? Head on over. Let's talk. Here we go. Everybody, how y'all doing today? My name is Chris Root, and as always, it is an honor to have you with us here today on this amazing Wednesday morning. For those of you that aren't aware, every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., we upload a new podcast available for you. We are also available on multiple platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and also Apple Podcasts. Feel free to check us out on social media. We're on Instagram and on Facebook. You can search us with our handle, which is at LT Podcast CR. That's at LT Podcast CR. And if I encourage you guys to like and subscribe, share with your friends, let your family know, the good and positive, encouraging thing that we are offering here at the Let's Talk Podcast. Our goal is to encourage you just right off the bat in the morning and help you to have a great, amazing day with God, and to let you know that, God's still alive and he's in charge and he's doing great things in our lives. And that's what we want to do here. We want to encourage you guys and, just take a short bit of your time every Wednesday morning and just let you know that, hey, we love you and so does Jesus as well. And thank you again for being here today. It's an honor to have you with us. We're going to go ahead and hop right into it. I am going to talk about today is, are you hearing his voice? Are you hearing his voice? Of course, whose voice is that? Jesus' voice is what we're talking about here today. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk about Solomon. Some of you may know the story of Solomon. Solomon, using wisdom, and we're going to talk about Solomon today. How many of you guys have friends, right? I hope all of you guys today can answer this question and say that you all have friends of some sort. Some of us have a friend or many friends. I guarantee you, if I could say that I can tell you one thing that you do with your friend, you think, okay, Chris, how do you know what I do with my friends? Well, it's simple. You do what I'm doing right now, right? You talk. It's important that friends talk and get to know one another, get to know what their life's about, what their interests are, and what they're doing in life. See, the human relationships are formed by sharing ideals and experiences with one another. See, sometimes we share through a series of text messages. That's right, text messages. I don't know about you, but I'm not a phone guy. So what I mean by that is I can't stand talking on a phone for a long time. I'm more of a, hey, I'll send you a text message. Hey, how you doing? Hey, what's going on? Get you a quick response back and forth. Now, sometimes my wife, when she grabs her phone, unfortunately, she'll see several messages on the phone. Usually it's from where the kids grab her phone and all of a sudden we have what we like to call emoji wars, right? Where we just go back and forth for, 20 minutes and we just send each other funny emojis back and forth and funny clips. And, she may not care for that much, but I think it's absolutely amazing. But, yeah, so if you guys, do me a favor down the bottom, comment, what is your favorite emoji? Your favorite emoji. Go ahead and comment that down there that you like to text somebody. I'm surprised what we're going to see with that one. But yeah, so lots of times we would text back and forth, and over globally, there's millions of texts a day and even billions of texts every year that go back and forth. You see, human relationships, like I said before, are formed by sharing ideals, and a lot of us do that by using text messaging. You see, but we must communicate to know one another. We must communicate to just check on one another and let them know that we're there for them, that we care for them. The same is true with our relationship with God. We have to communicate with him, but not only communicate with him, but we must hear his voice. We must hear the voice of God. And not only hear his voice, but trust that God is there to deliver on his promises and that he will pull through on what he has promised us to do. God will never fail us. He will never fail us. If he promises it, you can take it to the bank. He will do it. What if I walked up to you guys today and I handed you a check? That's right, a check. Checks aren't really, popular that much anymore, right? A lot of people are doing such as Bitcoin. If you are blessed to be involved in that, or doing, some type of cryptocurrency or transferring money back and forth with different programs and stuff online that you can use. And, the other day where I was at a place getting my car worked on, and this old lady came in, and the elderly lady, and she came in and she was needing her air conditioning worked on. Well, while she was getting the air conditioning work done, they told her what it was, and they told her how much everything came to, and she pulled out a checkbook. I was surprised. I know people still use them, but it's just you don't see him that much anymore. She pulled out her checkbook and she's like, "How much do I owe you?" And the young guy behind the counter, he was looking at her like she was crazy, like, "What is this?" And and I knew what was about to happen. And she wrote the check out and she gave it to him, and she's like, "Here you go." And he just looked at it. How is she paying for this with a piece of paper? It's not plastic, it's not cash. What's going on? She's not tapping her phone on the credit card machine. And she went ahead and said, "You okay? This is a check." And he's like, "You take checks, don't you?" And he was like, "I think so." Went back, got the manager, and he came out, and together they were able, finally, after a few minutes, they were to successfully go ahead and take care of that check and cash it for her, for the payment of their services. And if I gave you a check today, most of you would probably right away look at what? One, who's the check written out to? And two, is the check written directly? How much is the check for, right? How much money is the check for? That'd be probably our first look, like, whoa, what's the amount of that check? And then if it's to you or not. What if I wrote you a check and I had the line as to the amount blank and as to what was the amount for as blank, but yet I have my signature on it? That'd be pretty incredible, right? Well, today on the podcast, I want to talk to you guys about examine a time in the Bible. You see, when Solomon received a blank check from God, see, it was made out to him, and yet it has God's signature already applied. All Solomon had to do was just fill in the amount. Not necessarily the dollar amount, but yet the description of what he wanted from God. The description of what he wanted from God. Wow. What if you were in that position? What if you were there and God wrote you a check and say, "You know what? Whatever you want, whatever you need, just put it on the line and it's yours. You could take it to the bank and it's yours." You see, many people claim that they are willing to do anything that God tells them, but yet they never seem to hear his voice. So the issue is not God's unwillingness to speak, but yet our refusal to listen, or their lack of understanding of how to properly hear the voice of God. See, God speaks to us in a variety of ways. Let's consider just a couple ways that God speaks to us, right? The first and most popular one, God speaks to us through his word, right? Sometimes it happens in our devotion time. Hopefully we're setting time aside to where we have time between us and God. God should be the very top on your priority list. We know that, right? We understand that God deserves our time first and foremost before anyone else in our life. God should be first. Sometimes it's hard to, I'll be honest. Sometimes it's hard to be consistent with that, right? Sometimes it's hard. It's like when you set time to pray or read the word of God, things interruptions happen, your phone goes off, kids walk into the room, something always happens at that moment. But what's important, guys, is that when that happens, you get right back on track. You take care of whatever the problem is and get right back on track with God. Don't give up just because you're interrupted or something came in conflict with that time that you set aside for God. See, it's important that we read our word and that we allow God to speak to us through his word. And not only that, but in other times, it happens when we are listening to an anointed man or woman of God, right? Listening to a preaching video. How about this? Listen to a preaching video, or even being in church yourself. Wow, right? Going to church physically. It's very important. There's many times that I've been in a church service and I was listening to my pastor or minister preaching, and all of a sudden God spoke to me, and it was very clear. And I spoke about this a few times on some other episodes as well. God either said, "Go pray for this person," or led me to help somebody out or bless somebody in some way. And it's just, God will use opportunities like that to speak to you. And it's important that we are willing to listen. And not just when someone else is preaching, or whether you're hearing a podcast, right? Like right now. I hope God speaks to you through this podcast, but also through prayer, right? A popular way is through prayer. God would speak to us through prayer. And it says in 1 Kings 19:12 that yet God would speak to us with a still small voice. He would speak to us through our prayer. And it's one of the reasons why we view prayer as a communication with God. You see, it should be a dialogue, and not a monologue, but yet a dialogue. There should be a moments in our practice that while we're praying, that we listen to God. We take time to listen. Sometimes we're so busy telling him what we want and telling him about our problems and our situation that we just need to take a second, breathe, and listen for the voice of God. A third way that he would speak to us is through our dreams, right? Solomon could say amen to that. God would speak through us through our dreams. Not every dream we have, now listen, not every dream we have comes from God, but yet there are many times that he elects to speak to us through our dreams or while we're asleep. And that's exactly what happened to Solomon. That's exactly the situation that happened to Solomon. And I'm going to go to First Kings chapter 3, verse 5. First Kings chapter 3, verse 5. And it says, "In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God said, Ask what I shall give thee." Wow, right? Ask what I shall give thee. What an amazing experience that Solomon had right there. Asking anything you request, I will do for you. You see what tremendous opportunity and an important decision that Solomon had to make at that very moment. I wonder what would our decision be there, right? I would be nervous. Be like, oh, don't want to mess this up, you know? And but what would Solomon request? Would he request money? Fame? Hey, pumpkin spice latte. Some of us say amen to that. And that sounds good right now. See, most of us are probably drinking that right now on a Wednesday morning on the way to work. But see, most of us know that the answer that Solomon gave. But do you know what answer that you would truly give God? What answer would you give him? I'm curious. What answer would you give God if he said in your dream, "Okay, I'll give you anything you want, just ask." Just ask. You see, even if you've never experienced a dream like Solomon did, it is the will of God that you hear his voice and become familiar with it. See, the most important decision that you can make and should make right now is that you will be open to hear God's voice. See, typically, the way that he has spoken to you in the past will be the method that he uses to speak to you in the future. Not all the time, but most of the time, God will use the same method to speak to you again. That's why it's so important, guys. That's why it's extremely important that one, that we consistently make time to read his word so that, he can speak to us and take that time where we say, you know what, God, this is just for me and you. No one else, no other distractions. The phone's turned off, the door's locked, everything's shut down, God. It's just me and you. Speak to me. Show me what you want. Direct me, God. Lead me and guide me and show me the direction that you want me to do in my life and where you want me to go today. Right. And also it's why it's important that we show up to the house of God, that we're showing up and we're listening to the man or the lady that's preaching the word of God, that God has assigned and designed for us to have in our direction for us to have that week for us in our lives. It's important that we physically go and that we ask God, God, I'm here today. I want to leave changed and I want to leave knowing that I have a clear understanding of what you have for me and in my life. We have to make sure that we're prayed up, that we're reading the word of God, that we're listening to the preaching that we in our direction that we're receiving, and that we are willing to not only listen and understand it, but yet understand when God is speaking to us. You see, while these spiritual disciplines are important for everyone to develop, we should be intentional about seeking the ways God communicates with us, most often and being especially attuned to the sound of his voice. When God speaks, do you listen? And when you listen, you understand what he's telling you. And go to Proverbs chapter 30, verse 8. And it says, Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me. See, believe it or not, the wisdom of the Bible tells us it is possible to have too much money if that will cause us to not be concerned about the things of God. See, likewise, it is possible for us to become bitter at Him because of our poverty. See, that doesn't mean, though, that someone you think is rich or you view as poor does not have a good relationship with God. See, because the amount of money that they have or didn't have. See, their response is how their wealth or poverty affects their walk with God. Depends on that specific person. See, lots of times we see rich people as, oh, they're sinners, they're going to hell. That doesn't mean that at all, just because God blessed them and blessed them to be wealthy. What if God blessed them because he knew that they can handle it and he knew that they would be able to take care of his children and take care of things that he had prepared for them in their future and in their lives to better his kingdom, right? So we have to be careful not to make sure that we're judging people. What we should be doing is, right, common sense. We need to be praying that God allows us to not have more or less money than we can handle, and plus make sure that we have the right attitude. I'm going to go ahead and go to another verse here today, actually a few of them. We're going to go ahead and go to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. And it says, Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you, the revelation of Jesus Christ. The next verse I want to go to is actually 1 Peter as well. It's going to be 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 7. And it says, But the end of all things is at hand. But ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. And finally, another First Peter, we're going to do First Peter chapter 5, verse 8. And it says, Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. You see, the Bible is not telling us that we can never enjoy a good laugh. After all, the book of Proverbs, right? It tells us that laughter does us good. It's like medicine. See, however, just like the love of money, not money itself, but yet is the root of all evil. The love of laughter, meaning making it the most important thing in your life, is also not good. See, being sober minded does not mean being a stick in the mud, but yet it does mean that we understand when to be serious and act accordingly. Hearing God's voice is an excellent start, but that is not where the story ends. Sometimes God gives instruction, and the proper response is a hearty yes, Lord, but followed by a diligent obedience, right? Always remember that it's truly impossible to say no, Lord, because if He is the Lord of your life and if He's really important to you, you will always respond with a yes to any request that God makes of you. See, at other times when God asks us a question, we have multiple options of how to respond. Certainly, though, when God asked Solomon what he wanted, Solomon could have responded in any number of inappropriate ways, right? But yet, a blank check from the Lord should not be used to settle personal grudges against others. I'm going to say that again. A blank check should not be used to settle personal grudges against others. You see, remember, guys, we are to pray for one another and even those who despitefully use us. That's a hard one sometimes, right? We must make sure that we're there to pray for others. Even if they come against us or may say bad things about us, we still have to pray for them. You see, this is example. You see, when the disciples asked Jesus for permission to call fire to fall from heaven and destroy people who had just rejected them. See, Jesus responded by telling them, "Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of." He said that in Luke 9, verse 55. You see, when God will ultimately punish the wicked, we must remember that it is His choice, not ours. See, He determines when and how He judges. See, He has called us to walk with compassion and to respond with humility, just as we see revealed in Solomon's response to the Lord's offer. We're going to go ahead and go to 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 9. And it says here, it says, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" See, Solomon did not ask for a long life, but yet he received it. Solomon did not ask for massive wealth, but yet he obtained it. See, the story implies that God would have granted him long life or riches if he would have asked it. But yet Solomon displayed selfless humility and asked for an understanding heart, which we commonly refer to as today as wisdom. You see, as a result, he was rewarded with both a long life and a financial gain, all as a bonus. You see, not only did he frame the request in a way that revealed his true motive to rightfully be able to, lead the nation of Israel, but yet he also acknowledged that they are a great people and the people who belong to the Lord. See, it is commonly said that no one can be a great leader unless they are first an effective follower. Must be a follower first. I think that's important, to hear. Must be a follower before you could be a leader. You see, because Solomon followed God, he was able to lead the nation of Israel into a place of great wealth and influence during Solomon's reign. See, however, there is one additional piece of information commonly overlooked. You see, there was one condition upon which those promises, would depend. God conditioned his promise on Solomon's obedience, and that if it would thou walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. But unfortunately, Solomon eventually failed to walk in God's ways. See, we must be like Solomon in one respect. We have to respond to the Lord with selfless humility. It's important that we respond with selfless humility unto the Lord. See, but we must refuse to follow that Solomon's example of disobedience. You see, we should think of our responsibility when we hear from God as involving three parts. One, we must listen for his voice, respond with selfless humility, and obey his instructions and endure until the end. You see why wisdom is helpful for the common everyday task of life. It is important often. It is the most often appreciated in the midst of a seemingly impossible situation. See, Solomon found himself facing a dilemma. See, that matches the criteria, and it has become the most famous example of his wisdom on display. Some of you guys know exactly where I'm going. He's very popular for this situation I'm going to talk about here. You see, one role of Israel's rulers traditionally filled was being a judge. You see, one day, two immoral women approached Solomon with a serious problem. You see, as a judge, Solomon was tasked with listening to their testimony and determining which woman was actually telling the truth and which one was telling a lie. Both women were the mothers of newborn infants. They all lived in the same house. According to one of the women, she fell asleep with her baby in her arms and awoke to discover that the child in her arms had passed away. You see, upon close examination of the baby, she discovered the baby was not hers, and she assumed that the other woman had smothered her child unintentionally in the night. Then she allegedly switched the babies to steal the healthy child from her, the real mother. You see, the second woman claimed that this was all a lie and that the mother of the child that passed away was attempting to steal the baby that she currently held and insisted belonged to her. Solomon was faced with a major dilemma. See, there was no witnesses that could be called, no DNA evidence that could be used to determine which woman was telling the truth and which one was telling the lie. You see, the life of a future of a baby was at stake, and as well as Solomon's reputation as a God-called ruler. So only by the wisdom received from God could Solomon determine the real mother without an aid of expert witnesses or evidence. See, his solution was equally unconventional and effective. We're going to go ahead and go to 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 24 and 25. 24 says, "And the king said, 'Bring me a sword.' And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, 'Divide the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other.'" Wow, right? Wow. Imagine that situation. You're there, someone's lying, they stole your child, and then all of a sudden the king says, "Bring me a sword." You talk about silence. Uh-oh, what's about to happen? Then he says that he's going to split the child in two. This is crazy, right? But listen, Solomon understood that the prospect of both children being dead would not bother the mother who was lying as much as it would the real mother of the child who survived the night. And he was correct. You see, the real mother cried out and willingly sacrificed her role as mother in order to save the life of her baby. See, the woman who was lying had no such reaction, and yet she was satisfied just by knowing that her roommate would no longer have what she did not. Solomon wisely took the child from the hands of the lying woman and restored the baby to the rightful mother. This is wisdom that comes from God. You see, Solomon's reputation grew instantly as a king who ruled with wisdom from God. You see, because all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, they revered him and knew that the wisdom of God was in him. You see, consider what God was able to use Solomon to accomplish once a ruler of Israel had the attention and the respect of the people he ruled. It's important that we understand that we need to be careful that our purpose in life is contribute to the building of God's kingdom and not our own. See, it's important to realize that our reputation matters. There's a reason in Proverbs 22:1 that tells us that a good name is more precious than gold. A good name is more precious than gold. You see, guys, it's important that we understand that God is here and he's speaking to us, he's leading us, he's directing us. He has a path set before us. And it's up to us to follow him. It's up to us to have that relationship with him. I talk about it all the time that we need to make sure that we are connected to God, connected to the source. And not only that, but we have to also make sure that we're willing to take time to think about it, and pray about it, ask God about it. You know, it's interesting. I was thinking when my pastor, when I started being involved with the youth group and, being all excited and everything, and also having a family and getting married and having children. And I would go to my pastor and I would say, "Pastor, I really want to do this with my future or do that with my future. I'm really looking at this, or I'm really interested in this situation, that situation in life. Or I'm eager and have a desire to do this or do that." You know what he would always tell me? "Brother, let me pray about it and I'll get right back with you." Some of you have been in that same situation, right? And I tell you what, sometimes I couldn't delay gratification. I was just like, "What? Just give me an answer now. What about now? Okay, just tell me. Just tell me. Yes, no, what, maybe, what?" And I get so excited and so eager. And the thing is, he was right every single time. Every single time he was right. And wow, what an example, right? Don't just jump into something because you want it. Don't haste into something because you can't delay gratification and wait. Everything you do, no matter how small or how large it is, pray first. Give it over to God. Allow God to give you his approval and allow God to speak to you and say, "Yes, do this. Don't do this," to encourage you, to reassure you. Because if he's not in it, you shouldn't want him. And it's important to remind us of that if God's not in it and if God doesn't bless it, then we don't want it, because he can see so much farther than we can. He knows the end results. He knows what's coming tomorrow. He knows what's coming the next day. And we have to have faith and trust in him, and faith and trust in those that God puts in our life as leadership, and that God gives us to follow and communicate with and invest in. And it's important that we take time to listen to God. And not just that, but we have to make sure that that we have a good name, right? Like I said in Proverbs 22:1, tell us a good name is a good name is more precious than gold. When people see you, what do they see? Right? When people seen Solomon, they knew that he got wisdom from God because of the situation that God blessed him to be able to show his wisdom through. When people see you, do they see someone that's wise? Do they see someone that loves God, someone that has compassion, someone that's there to help those that people may throw to the side? That's someone that's not there to tear someone down or use them as a stepping stone or think that they're better than them or look at them as if they don't even exist. No, no, no. When people see you, do they see Jesus? And that's a powerful statement to make. I know it may sound cheesy to some people, but it's not, right? It's not, because we need to make sure that we're striving to do what's right, right? We want people to, when they see us, we want them to see someone that's positive, someone that's pure, that someone that knows where our answer lies, someone that knows that we have a relationship with God, not just only when people are looking at us in church service, but when we walk outside this church doors and every remark, when someone cuts you off, do they see Jesus in you, right? That's a hard one, right? When someone makes fun of you or says something bad online about you or lies about you or does things like that to you, are we still representing Jesus in that very moment? And it's easier to say about it than it is to actually be in the situation at the time. And I get that, and I understand that. And no one's perfect. And I'm not bashing anyone, not calling anyone out. All I'm trying to say, guys, is one, take time in your life and make sure that you allow God to speak to you, and make sure you know that that's God's voice, right? Lots of times we like to justify to ourselves that, we give ourselves the answers that we want to hear. But we need to make sure that it's God that's responding to us. And not just that, but make sure that when they see you, that they see Jesus. Hopefully this encouraged you today. Hopefully this was something positive that helped you in your life here today on this Wednesday morning. And thank you so much for joining us. As always, like I said before, we have a new episode every Wednesday morning here on the Let's Talk podcast. Hope you guys have an amazing week and even better day today. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Have a good one. Bye-bye.